Earlier this offseason, we did coaches on the hot seat. Today, it is players on the hot seat. And this one can mean different things at different times. But for the most part, it is players who are facing pressure for either trades or just potentially leaving their team or whatever it may be. So, it's going to mean different things for different players as this list goes along. So coming in at number 5, it is Kevin Durant. It already kind of sounded like he was on the block anyway. There was at least a couple of moments in the offseason where it was, well, they could package these picks together and go get this guy. They could package it and da-da-da-da. And for the Phoenix Suns, this year, there's a lot of pressure on them. We talked about them. They made the list for teams facing the most pressure this upcoming season. When you are spending the amount that they are spending, and you have these 3 guys at the top of your roster, there are going to be high expectations. And quite frankly, last year, they came up extremely short of those. And so if this is another year where it is starting to kind of not go that way, not go their way, excuse me. I think that Phoenix could make a move and try to recoup some of the stuff that they gave up in a Kevin Durant deal. And there are a lot of teams who are looking pretty good, who have some draft picks to move, who might fancy themselves one Kevin Durant away from being a title contender. And so I think that if Durant and the Suns don't get off to a very good start this year, I think there could be Kevin Durant on the move. For this next one, it's not so much that I think he would get traded, but this is more a perception thing. I think if this year doesn't go well for Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks, that I don't know if Young gets moved out of Atlanta, but I do think he gets moved down a tier or 2 in conversations. I think we have kind of run out of patience in the Trae Young game. When we tried bringing in DeJounte Murray, it never worked. It never came close to working. And so there was that blip there where they made it to the conference finals, and there was a lot going on against Philadelphia that led them to that point. But since then, it hasn't looked remotely close to what we saw from that team. And this year now, there isn't there's just this other guy who needs the ball, as my cat jumps in. There isn't this other guy who's chiming in and taking a lot of the spotlight or whatever. I'm forcing that metaphor because there's a cat jumped on me for those who are listening. But I think that for Trae Young now, that this is, and it was before, but it is so clearly his team now, that if it is another year of mediocrity out in Atlanta and for Trae Young, and it is another year where he is getting his stats, but the team is not playing winning basketball, then I think he kind of moves down a tier or 2 in a lot of the discussions about NBA players. At 3, we already talked about him, if you're listening to the full episode, in players who will decide the season, but it's Jimmy Butler. When Pat Riley comes out and calls out your contract situation in the offseason, pretty good chance that the seat that you're sitting on is a little bit toasty. And so I think that, pardon the Miami Heat pun there, but I do think that if Jimmy Butler wants to stay in Miami, then he and this team have to get off to a very good start. I think there was a lot of frustration with Jimmy Butler talking some smack when he was hurt last year, and just with how everything ended in Miami. And we know Pat Riley, little bit cutthroat, a little bit ruthless when it comes to those sorts of decisions. So I think the pressure is on Jimmy Butler to come up with a big time year. At 2, Darius Garland. It seems like for now, the situation has settled out in Cleveland, but we saw last year, Garland got hurt and this team did well. And now you have Donovan Mitchell signing a contract extension, and we know in the NBA that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to stay there the whole time. But it at least, I think, moves him down the list of people who might get moved. And it puts Garland right at the top. And so if this 4-man unit of Allen, Mobley, Garland, and Mitchell is going to work, it kind of has to work now. They have, I think, again, run out of runway for this to be a thing, and I think that this is going to be a year where there's going to be pressure on him to go out and get the job done. And at number 1, it's Brandon Ingram. This one's tricky because it feels like if they could have moved him, they would have by now. But it's a weird contract situation because no one disagrees that Brandon Ingram is a talented player and probably, honestly, from a talent standpoint, a max level player. But he also doesn't really seem like a guy who, if you give him the max, he's going to elevate people around him and you're going to be fine. Like, he feels like the max on a bad team, which is it's weird. So I think there is pressure on him to go out and show that he can mix his talents. Sorry, it sounded like someone was inside, but they're yelling from outside. That he can mix his talents and be very, very good and also be a part of a winning basketball team. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Brandon Ingram to show all of that this year.